All right, get out your Bibles, y'all. All right, funny story, at least funny story to me before we get started. Steve's talking about putting away your cell phones. And early on in my business career, now don't fall asleep while I'm telling you this part, but I was a trainer and I taught people how to do the job. And so I was up in front of this class of, 20 or 30 people, and I was telling them how to talk to the potential clients who would be calling in about something. I can't remember what it was. But we were at a kind of a pause, and somebody's phone started ringing, and it was a song by a group called Outkast, called So Fresh and So Clean. Yeah, it was that one. And I looked up to see whose phone's ringing right now, and it was a guy that was, you would never expect him to have a ringtone like that. He had a full suit on, tie on. I just thought it was funny. Anyway, so why am I telling you that? One, I thought it was funny. Two, don't ever put people in a box, because people can surprise you. People that are, you don't need to look it up. It's just it's an old rap song. It's all right. It's all right. So tonight we're going to be talking about Genesis 33. So if you go ahead and turn there, we're going to get started in just a second. But let's review a little bit about what we did, what we talked about last week. So Genesis 32, we had Jacob wrestling God, right? So God put him in a figure 4, changed Jacob's name. Did y'all pick that up from last week? That he changed his name. So he changed his name to what? Do y'all remember? Israel. Yeah. So did y'all know that God's still in the business of changing lives and changing the direction of lives? So just a little bit of review from last week. Steve covered that, but just wanted to remind you where we're at. So this week, if you're reading along in the little book there, it's called Surprised by Grace. So let's talk a little bit about grace before we get started. So grace, I have up there, it's undeserved favor. So what does grace mean to you? And if you want to answer, just raise your hand, I'll call on you. But what does grace mean to you? Giving sympathy, okay? Somebody want to add something to that? Yes, sir. We're saved by, okay? Anybody want to add, Preston? Something we don't deserve? Yes, sir. Undeserved forgiveness? Yes, ma'am. The title of a song. It's amazing. All right. Anybody over here want to add anything? Yes, sir. Giving somebody a second chance. I like y'all's definition. I like how you built that up. A lot of great points were made there. So thank you for sharing that. So second part of the question I have for you tonight. Who's ever experienced any of that? Miss Tony, can you tell us what happened in you? Yeah. You didn't deserve it, did you? Yeah. So we've probably all experienced it in one shape or another. If you are a Christ follower here tonight, you have experienced grace. And the rest of you can, if you choose that. And so we're going to talk a lot more about that as we go on. So the Hebrew word for favor, anybody know what favor means? What does favor mean? Yep. What do you want to add to that? So you do something for somebody? Yep. Anybody else want to add something? Preston, what you got? Okay. So you're giving something to somebody. Well, the Hebrew word for favor is the same word for grace. So they're similar in the Hebrew language. So grace is mentioned 131 times in the Bible. 124 of those times it occurs in the New Testament. Of those 124 times, Paul talks about it 86 times. So Paul did what with the gospel? Anybody know what Paul did? Yeah, like he went all over the place, right? If it hadn't been for Paul, most of us probably wouldn't be sitting in this room tonight. As the gospel spread because of the work that he did. Now, God would have probably used somebody else, but I'm just saying, like, because of Paul making himself available, we're here tonight because the gospel spread among the Gentiles. I found this quote by a guy named John Piper. He's a preacher, but I liked it. He said, Grace is, God's character trait. It's his character trait to treat people better than we deserve. If you talk to some older folks and you ask them how they're doing, they may say, better than I deserve. My dad used to say that all the time, and it took people aback a little bit sometimes, like, what do you mean better than you deserve? What do you deserve? And then it would give him a chance to talk about what God had done in his life. But grace is God's character trait of treating people better than we deserve, but it's also the action or power or influence which produces real, practical outcomes in people's lives. He goes on to say, grace is so powerful, it overflows in the people who have accepted it from God. So, you've probably heard people in your life, maybe you've said these things, they may say, man, I'm so lucky. Man, karma's going to get you. Or it's karma because something good happened to me. I put good energy out, and so I'm getting stuff back that's good. I'm going to tell you something. It's a lie. If you're a Christ follower, if you believe in Jesus, luck has nothing to do with anything in your life. Karma has nothing to do with anything in your life. It's the grace of God that works in your life. God's sovereignty that makes all that happen in your life. Luck has nothing to do with it. So that's free. You didn't have to pay for that one. So Genesis 33, our text that we're going to look at tonight, demonstrates that power of grace in these two brothers that we've been talking about. So Jacob and Esau. So it's grace. We talk about the grace from God, and we're also going to talk about grace that we can have towards other people because of what God has done in our lives. So that plays out in chapter 33. So let's look at the first couple of verses there. So 1 through 4. I labeled this one disaster prep. So Jacob, you remember, he fell asleep. He was waiting. He knew that his brother was going to be coming. And then that's when he wrestled with God. He's praying, God, this is going to go bad. I know this is going to go bad. And so he's waking up. So in verse 1, I'll read through this real quick. Then Jacob lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau was coming, and 400 men with him. 400. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the two maids, and he put the maids and their children in front, and Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph last. But he himself passed on ahead of them and bowed down to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. Then Esau ran to meet him, embraced him, and fell on his neck, and kissed him, and they wept. So have you ever done something to someone and you regretted your actions? Yeah. Felt bad about it. What had Jacob done to Esau?
He betrayed him.
He betrayed him?
He stole his birthright from all beings.
Did you learn to whisper in a sawmill? Okay. I love the enthusiasm. It's great. All right, so he stole his birthright, correct? He tricked him. He tricked him. And now his brother's showing up after all these years, and he's got 400 dudes with him who may have ill intentions. So you correlate that to your own life. You said something to Susie over there. Susie didn't like it, or Susie had a problem with it. Susie rolls up with all her homegirls, and you're going to have a problem the next day. Right? Maybe so. You don't know. But here's Jacob. Here's Jacob. Stay with me. Stay with me. Here's Jacob in this situation. He's wrestled God. He got what he wanted from God. And now he's waking up and he's facing some reality, right? What would you think in his place, if you're in his shoes, what do you think Esau's going to do? You see him roll up with these 400 dudes. What do you think is going to happen? I can't hear you, brother. Yeah. Esau is going to wake up. He's going to come down there and he's going to choose violence, right? So he is terrified, as he should be, right? Because he did something terrible to his brother. Now, something interesting here, it talks about how he ordered his family. So he put people in a certain order. Why do you think the Bible takes the time to talk about how he put people in a certain order? Yes, ma'am. Okay, I think that maybe. What else? Who wants to add to that? Showed his attitude towards other people? Yeah, I think you're seeing part of it, but what did you say? Yeah. So he put them in a certain order, and then he got in front of them, right? So what I saw in the commentary that I read is that, and a commentary is a book that complements the Bible. There's a ton of these. If you go on a website called Bible Gateway, you can look up a verse that you want to look at, and then on the side there's all these links that talk about resources and stuff like that. And there's a link to these things called commentaries. And what the commentaries are done, it's somebody who basically goes through and they're looking at the word, and they're giving you a lot of the history and a lot of the other facts that help you to have like a broader picture of what's going on. So the one that I was looking at talked about a couple of theories around why I put him that way. So, yes, he put himself out front, but he got them all in order. He had his servants first, and then his family, and last his wife and Joseph. So he put them that way, one, because it was customary. When you went and you met somebody, you put people in a certain order based on, you made a point about status, and I think that's correct. There was a status part of that, so you can feel good about your answer. You're welcome. I know I'm looking out for you. So you wanted to have there was custom there, but also he did it from a protection standpoint. Bless you. So he put himself out front because he didn't know what his brother was going to do. And yeah, he put his closest family members in the back in the event that things went south. Maybe they could escape. He wasn't sure. But it's just really interesting that take a pause sometimes and look at some of these things that the Bible puts there, because there's reasons for it. It's not just there for, whatever. There's a purpose behind that. Verse 3 talks about him bowing down. Why do you think he bowed down to Esau? Dice. Grace and mercy? Like, what do you mean grace and mercy? Yeah. Okay. What do you want to add, Abigail? And then you back there, okay? Respect, okay? What do you got? Right. Right. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Somebody over here have something? Yes, ma'am. That he was humble. Yeah. So going back to the commentary, it talked about humbling himself. He did take a chance to humble himself because of all these reasons. He saw these guys coming, and these guys weren't, just walking around with umbrellas. I mean, they've got swords. These were soldiers. These were professional dudes. They weren't messing around. So he humbled himself. So the question that came to my mind is that when you've done something wrong and you're looking for a little grace, how do you handle that? Have you ever thought about humbling yourself for those that you've done wrong to? What would that look like, you think? So let's say I did something that was hurtful to Steve. I know. How could I? How dare I? Yeah. And he shows up with 400 middle schoolers hopped up on Mountain Dew. And so now I've got to figure out, like, dude, what do I do? How do I do this? Like, what does it sound like to humble yourself in a situation where you need forgiveness or grace in this instance? Yes, sir. Yeah. You say sorry. I think that's a great start. Yes, sir. Yeah. Give them stuff? Yeah. So I can give Steve the $1 that I have in my wallet. Because I'll have to ask Sarah first. But I'll see what I can do. But yeah, gifts, saying you're sorry. Yes, sir. Yeah, you could ask them if they're all right. If somehow I hurt Steve physically, which is, I mean, he's a specimen, so I don't imagine that would ever be possible. But yeah, so he bowed down and he humbled himself. So I can tell you this from my experience: when I know that I'm in the wrong, when I know that I've made a bad choice and it has hurt other people, coming to that person in a humble state of mind and being humble before them and saying, "Look, I messed up. I did something that was terrible. I want to fix that. I value our relationship. I don't want that to end. I want to change it. I want to make it right." Rather than saying, "I don't really care if you like me or not," or something like that. "We can figure it out," or "Sorry." Did you know that the way that you say something, like the tone of your voice, makes a big difference? You can say the nicest thing in the world, but if your tone of voice is off, it makes it a lot harder for the other person. Maybe your mom has told you that before, or your dad. So think about your tone of voice. Think about being humble. All right. So verse 4, we see our first instance of grace, the surprise of grace that the book talked about. What happens in verse 4? Then Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. So here he is. Jacob's like, "I'm bowing down before my brother. I see all these soldiers with him. I don't know what's going to happen." What happens? Esau runs towards his brother to embrace him. So, thinking about what Joseph had done, what Jacob had done to his brother, what did Jacob deserve to have happen in that situation? A knuckle sandwich, that's probably a start. Yeah. Yeah. He did not deserve, he deserved justice, right? He deserved justice. Just like all of us deserve justice for the sins that we commit. All right, let's move on. Verses 5 through 11. Reconciliation. What does it mean to reconcile? Anybody know? Yeah, forgive. That's part of it. Yeah. Yeah. When you reconcile, you bring things back together. So in this instance, yes, it's all about forgiveness. So let's read 5 through 11. He lifted his eyes and saw the women and the children. So this is Esau. He lifted his eyes and saw the women and the children and said, "Who are these with you?" So he said, and this is Jacob, "The children whom God has graciously given your servant." Then the maids came near with their children, and they bowed down. And Leah likewise came near with her children, and they bowed down. And afterward Joseph came near with Rachel, and they bowed down. And he said, "What do you mean by all this company that I have met?" And he said, "To find favor in the sight of my Lord." But Esau said, "I have plenty, my brother. Let what you have be your own." Jacob said, "No, please, if now I have found favor in your sight, then take my present from my hand, for I see your face as one who sees the face of God, and you have received me favorably. Please take my gift, which has been brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have plenty." Thus he urged him, and he took it. So in verse 5, Esau says, "Who are these people?" So Jacob hadn't told Esau about his family. Why do you think he hadn't told him about his family? Well, they had communication. They could write stuff. Yeah, because he knew that Esau was probably, well, he thought that Esau was going to be mad at him. He wanted to keep his family a secret, so if Esau came looking for him, he wouldn't be looking for a family, and they would just take out Jacob and leave the rest of them. An interesting thing he says also in verse 5. So this is Jacob says, "The children whom God has graciously given your servant." So there's our word again, right? Grace. So Jacob had done some terrible things, right? He had stolen his birthright, his brother's birthright. He had lied to his daddy. He'd done all this stuff. But he recognized that through his relationship with God, that God had been gracious to him and still given him this family. So Jacob knew it was God's grace that supplied his family, nothing that he did. Think about the people in your life and the things that you're in your life that are only there by the grace of God. So the fact that you got here tonight safely is by the grace of God. The place where you live that keeps the rain off your head, you have that by the grace of God. Not by anything that you've done. Your parents or whoever you happen to live with, whatever your situation is, the money that they have from their job, that's by the grace of God that they have that they can provide for you. Going over to verse 9. So why didn't Esau want the gift Jacob had sent? He had plenty already, right? It says there in the verse. So what do we know about Esau? He lost his birthright, right? So he was supposed to get all this stuff. He was supposed to be in a position of power. But he sold it for the temporary thing, right? Bowl of soup. Bowl of soup. That's right. But it was a temporary thing. He satisfied a temporary need by giving up a long-term asset. So the thing that God showed me about that, so Esau, even though he made a really bad choice to make that temporary, to satisfy that temporary need, and it messed up what was supposed to be for him, the point there, I think, is God can redeem you. He can change the trajectory of your life. So the trajectory is the way in which you're going. So the direction that your life is going. Even if you've given everything away for something temporary. So in y'all's case, I don't know what that is, but I think the Lord can show you that if you ask Him. He'll show you what things that you're potentially giving up a relationship with Him or blessings from Him to satisfy some short-term want or desire. So in these verses, we see brothers reconciled to each other, meaning they come back together because of God's grace. And that God's grace is working in their hearts to produce forgiveness. We also see the results of Esau being reconciled to God and experiencing grace from Him as well by still God's grace, still being blessed in a manner to where he doesn't need anything from his brother, who seemingly got, well, he not seemingly, but he got the birthright and all the status that came with it. All right. Next part, verses 12 through 18. I got one more part after this. So this part I labeled rest. Everybody knows what rest means, even though some of y'all don't rest enough, I don't think. All right. Something else that's free for you. Don't stay up to 3 o'clock in the morning playing video games or on your phone or whatever. Turn it off. Go to bed. You need it. You need it. All right. So let's look at verses 12 through 18. Then Esau said, "Let us take our journey and go, and I will go before you." But he said to them, "My Lord knows that the children are frail, and that the flocks and herds which are nursing are a care to me. And if they are driven hard, one day all the flocks will die. Please let my Lord pass on before his servant, and I will proceed at my leisure, according to the pace of the cattle that are before me, and according to the pace of the children, and until I come to the Lord at Seir." Esau said, "Please let me leave with you some of the people who are with me." But he said, "What need is there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord." So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir. Jacob journeyed to Succoth and built for himself a house and made booths for his livestock. I know, it's a funny word. It means booths. So what it is, it's a place for the cattle to eat and rest. I know. Steve gave me this one on purpose. All right. So, all right, one last verse. Let's read 18. Now Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Paddan-Ram. I'm probably not saying that right. And camped before the city. Okay. So why did I call this one rest? All right. So this is a really crazy time for Jacob. This is a really crazy day. So he wakes up in the morning, sees his brother coming, thinks, getting ready to die. The family's probably getting ready to be killed. I don't know how this is going to go. Then all of a sudden, His brother changes his mind. God's worked in his brother, and they're reconciled. So by God's grace, he's arrived healthy and safe in this place where he is, where he's taken the cattle. He can rest. So if you've got a problem with somebody, if you've got animosity, you've got anger, you've got resentment, you've got something that's between you and a friend, a family member, that's tearing you up. And I know that when I've had those times in my life where I've been really mad at somebody, I can feel it right in here. And you feel like you're just tense all the time. If you're really nervous about something, you're really scared about something, you're tense, right? So Jacob had just done that. He had lived that. But now it had been handled. It had been handled through the grace of God, and the weight had been lifted. He could rest now. So you can rest in God's grace too, knowing that he's in control, but you've got to decide that. And we're promised that he's in control and that he has a plan for us. Anybody know the Bible reference for the plan? What I'm talking about? What is it? Jeremiah 29:11. So write that one down and go read it. You've probably heard it, but I think you should read it. All right. Last two verses. 19 and 20. He bought the piece of land where he had pitched his tent from the hand of the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. They call it, they don't really know exactly how much that was. So I think that's why it just says pieces of money there. They don't know exactly what they were using at that particular time. And he made an altar there, and he called it El Elohi Israel. That's my best guess. All right. So in my Bible, it tells me what that means over in the little side thing, and it says God, the God of Israel, is what that means. So he's buying, I don't know if you caught this, but he bought a piece of land. It was in Canaan. Anybody ever heard, you familiar with Canaan? What is that? What's Canaan also known as? Anybody know? The Promised Land. So Canaan is the promised land for the Israelites. So this is the land that God says this is going to be the place where you dwell. The interesting thing here is that he buys land there. He didn't just take it, even though he knows that eventually it's going to be the land of Israel. But it wasn't time yet. So I thought that was pretty interesting that's pointed out like that. So this was, again, a scary time for him, but God had brought him through. He was in this place, and he wants to be thankful for it. He wants to thank God for what God has done in his life, what God has saved him from. He thought surely he was going to die, that bad things were going to come at the hands of his brother, that everything that he thought was there was going to be destroyed. But that didn't happen. And he knew that that was because of the grace of God. So he's thankful. So what does he do? He doesn't just say, God, I'm thankful. He does something tangible to express his thanks. He builds an altar. So in these times, people would build an altar as a way of remembering things. So how might y'all remember things? Maybe you're not going to build an altar, but what else? You could write it down. Does anybody journal? Like journal stuff? It's not. Yeah, it's not just for girls. I can tell you that. There's a lot of high-powered men in history that journaled. You think about the founders of the United States. You think about people like Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin and those kind of people. They wrote about their days. You look at Civil War history. Those generals and even the soldiers wrote about what they were doing on a day-to-day basis to remember what they had seen, what they had done, and in this case, what God had done in their lives and what God had saved them from. So think about the ways that you can acknowledge and be thankful for what God has done in your life. All right. Last couple of things. All right. So what I want you to think about is, what is God doing in your life right now? What has He brought you through already? Because I know some of y'all are dealing with some pretty heavy-duty stuff. Whether it's something going on in your family life, maybe there's something going on at school, maybe there's something going on in your head that you don't really understand. But I want you to know that God's grace is big enough to pull you out of that situation and to change the trajectory of your life, just like He did with Esau. So He can redeem any situation. The question that came to mind that I wrote down, so I'm going to read it just so I don't mess it up. So what have you signed up for that you need to get out of because it's taking you down a bad road? God's grace can get you off that road. Maybe that's not you. Maybe you're not on some bad road. Maybe you're the person that says, Adam, I've been a Christian since I was 6 years old. I got baptized, I got in the water, and I did everything. I told the preacher that I would serve the Lord for the rest of my life. I've already done that. Well, I have a challenge for you. So if you are a professing Christ follower, the challenge I have for you is maybe you're a person that seemingly has it all together. Like, I don't know, you're captain of whatever team. You get all the leading roles in whatever the production is. You get all the best grades. You are great at everything you put your hand to. First challenge is to thank God that His grace has put you in a position to succeed in all those things. Remember, your effort comes into play, but it's God's grace that allows you to do those things. The second part is maybe you're looking at other people who aren't as successful as you. Maybe they're not as cool as you are. Maybe they don't have some of the same set of friends as you are. Maybe you have, as a professing Christ follower, said, I don't want to hang out with those people because those people are weird. And maybe you've had the boldness to say that to their face. Maybe you're mean to other people, but you profess to be a Christian. Maybe you go to a school at MCA, or you're at church every single week. And by all accounts, you are a Christian. You say, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. You do everything that you're supposed to do to show the adults that you're a certain kind of way. But when it's you and your peer group, you're mean as a snake. I don't know, Steve, maybe I'm being a little too personal. I don't know. But at any rate, my challenge for you is God has shown you a tremendous amount of grace. And maybe those people that you're viewing a certain kind of way are waiting or needing somebody to show them what grace looks like so they can have that example and know what God wants to do in their lives as well. So if you are a Christ follower, I'm talking to you. if you're not a Christ follower yet, I'm not necessarily talking to you with that example because you don't have the power to be any other way. But if you've professed before other people and you've believed in your heart that Christ died for you, you have received a tremendous gift of grace. And I'm talking to myself here too, but that grace needs to be extended to other people. So the other day, I was listening to a podcast, because that's what old people do. And the guy on the podcast was talking about some things that he had done in his life basically the concept was that he had pre-decided some things. So I'm pre-deciding to be a person who, for the next 30 days, doesn't eat sugar or something like that. So I'm pre-deciding to be a person for the next 90 days that reads my Bible every day to build that habit. And then when a situation comes up about what am I going to do with my time, what am I going to put in my body, what have you, I've already made a decision about what I'm going to do. So my challenge to you tonight, especially those of you who are Christ followers, decide now that you're going to extend grace to the people God puts in your life, much like Esau extended grace to his brother, and to acknowledge and be thankful for the things that God has done for you in your life through his grace. So decide those things now so that when the time comes, you don't go back and forth, oh, I already know what I'm going to do. I know what I'm going to do in this situation. I'm going to show grace to this person who I need to forgive. I'm going to show grace to this person that may be a little different from me and maybe struggling a little bit. I'm going to show grace to them. I'm going to talk to them and show them the love of Christ tonight.